into Gaza and let them rebuild is delusional. Israel is already planning its own developments in Gaza and the occupied West Bank. They're doing as much demolition work in Gaza as possible to make it easier for their developers when they start building housing for Jews only, villas for the rich, and fancy resources near the sea. The traditional Zionist policy of creating facts on the ground is in full force. Palestine was fully populated and thriving center of commerce, industrial, agricultural, and cultural activity before Zionists arrived. Israel has built itself on top of its ruins. Gaza is just a continuation, a repetition of what was done before, except this time on a much larger scale and with more sophisticated weaponry and propaganda. After Gaza is empty and flat, Israel will come for the occupied West Bank. The last group Israel is coming for are the Palestinian citizens of Israel. If the suffering of Gaza's residents is not horrific enough to witness, I find Western collusion with Israel unbearable. Instead of doing everything possible to force Israel to stop the atrocities it is committing and rescue its victims, the world keeps offering Israel money, weapons, technology, and political support. With a small number of exceptions, the media give Israel a platform. Our media give Israel a platform and allow it to continue to spread its narrative. It is not just politicians who seem to buy into Israel's fraudulent narrative of war against Hamas and Israel's entitlement. It is also ordinary people who are confused or afraid to speak up for fear of being branded anti-Semitic. I do not believe that world leaders really don't know what Israel is doing and what it is up to. The world has a long and disturbing history of allowing genocides to take their course and taking decades to end obvious injustices and human suffering that should have never existed in the first place. Everything we see now has all been done before many times in human history. The Palestinians are the more recent in a long list of victimized people to whom the world has turned their backs. Israel cannot be allowed to get away with it, but it already has back in 1948. And it is counting on the world to continue to do nothing. So far, Israel's expectations have been met. Israel feels it is the right time, and it has a green light to complete its mission in Gaza and its wider settler colonial aims. As many of us have been warning for decades, the Palestinians in all of historic Palestine, not just Gaza, are on borrowed time. If the world does not intervene, Israel will continue to until it will achieve its aims. If it's any consolation to you, Israel is crumbling from within. But we need to help it crumble faster with severe sanctions and boycotts. Please do not get confused or doubtful when you see what our mainstream media report and how our own country and political parties are dealing with the genocide in Gaza and with Israel. Please do not be discouraged by accusations of anti-Semitism or by talk about the Holocaust. These are just known Zionist tactics to deflect from Israel's genocide and settler colonial aims. When a crime is committed, it does not matter who commits it. It does not even matter who the victims are. A crime is a crime. Everyone I know wonders what our individual little voices can accomplish. I am wearing my suffragette scarf today to remind myself that if it wasn't for a small minority of persistent, vocal, and visible women and men, women in this country would still not be allowed to vote. In their time, the suffragettes were seen as extremists. They were vilified, called every name you can imagine, beaten and arrested by police, not just for standing in the streets and holding signs. In prison, when they went on hunger strikes, they were brutally force-fed. They were seen as a major threat to orderly civil society. All injustice is wrong. All forms of harm that humans cause other humans are wrong. What the suffragists asked for, we now take for granted because it is so obvious. Demanding an immediate end to a genocide is also obvious. Together, we can make sure the Palestinians know they have not been forgotten and that genocide does not just disappear. Together, we can put pressure on our politicians and make Palestine an election issue for all parties. Together, we show that we do not sit quietly and tolerate our politicians' inhumanity and callousness about human life. Together, we can hit Israel's pockets by boycotting its Israeli products. Together and individually, we can educate more people so we can defeat Israeli Zionist propaganda and its helpers in our Western media. Together, we can flood our newspapers with letters and flood the BBC and other channels with complaints about their pro-Israeli bias and their immorality. We don't need to justify why we oppose a genocide. It is those who collude with genocide and settler colonialism that need to explain why they support a perpetrator instead of its victim. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you so much, Abigail. That was so powerful. Really, really powerful. From the heart. From the heart. Thank you. Wow, how do we follow that? I know. Free, free Palestine!
Free, free Palestine!
Free, free Palestine!
Free, free Palestine!
We are thousands, we are millions, we are all Palestinians. We are thousands, we are millions, we are all Palestinians. I'd like to invite Salim Gaeda to say a few words because, well, as he'll explain himself, some good news in a way came this week. So,
hi everyone. Abigail, I don't know how I will follow your eloquent speech, and your credentials speak for themselves. So, what are my credentials? So I am Palestinian. I was born in Gaza, and not just me, generations and generations of my family are Palestinians. Someone asked me, where are your family from? And I said, the only generations I recall of my family trees are all Palestinians. I don't really have any other blood. So Abigail gave you her perspective, and my perspective is that I and my family and generations of my family have experienced what she just told you. We've experienced the ethnic cleansing in 1948, and I still remember my grandfather. I still remember my great-grandmother. They all, I'm only 51. Hello. But they're still alive when I was a child, a teenager. And I was born in Gaza, and I was born a refugee. And actually, there was some bright moments of good life in Gaza. But you know what? When I reflect on it, these bright moments were only when we Palestinians were slaves. This is how. So when we were slaves, we were labored inside Israel. And as a teenager, actually, I did work in Israel. We were allowed to live, but only under that condition. Only when Israelis saw us as laborers, slaves, who we just must shut up and never say we want a country, never say we want a freedom. This is the only bright moment I recall. And since then, it just went downhill. I was really my speech was going to be different. It was going to be, I'm sorry to say, it's not just good news. There's a lot of bad news. One of my cousins